One chilling statement has haunted this entire investigation from day one. It did not originate from some trashy gossip column, nor a random amateur broadcast, but straight from a veteran federal investigator speaking officially to a massive media platform. Just 7 simple words that completely flip the reality of this mystery, provided you actually listen to them. He never intended to cause her harm. That is the exact quote. And it serves as the foundation of our entire discussion. We are skipping past the usual suspects, ignoring her current whereabouts, the forensic evidence, the massive security tape analysis, and all the familiar clues we covered throughout the previous 9 chapters. Our focus today narrows down to one extremely precise detail. We are examining his original blueprint for that sunrise strike, and the disastrous, irreversible split second that shattered it entirely. Let us wipe the slate clean. Forget the crimson stains outside the front door, the disguise, the bag, or the camera footage. Begin instead with a critical inquiry that the public has largely ignored. What was the attacker's true objective? Ignore the tragic aftermath and focus purely on the intended scheme. Consider the strategy already unfolding as he crept toward the property during that pitch-black winter dawn, completely covered in dark tactical gear, specifically selected to prevent trace evidence, hauling a large bag, armed with a weapon, and hiding his face completely save for a narrow slit. The reality of premeditated brutality is quite simple. It rarely ever resembles this setup. Intentional murder is brutally efficient, rarely needing heavy facial concealment, since remaining anonymous only matters if the victim survives to point a finger. An assassin has no use for a large carrying sack, as such gear clearly suggests an extraction or removal operation. Cold-blooded hits completely bypass the slow, calculated pacing of a criminal who mapped out several potential obstacles, though admittedly failing to anticipate every possible disaster. Assassinations are swift and chaotic, but the events of February first unfolded with deliberate, escalating patience rather than sudden aggression. The sequence of events possessed deep complexity, utilizing a structural blueprint strictly designed for pacing. And that specific framework actually holds an official title. Experts call it a calculated hostage extraction. It represents an operational strategy where severe physical trauma strictly contradicts the entire core objective. During a coordinated snatching, keeping the victim totally safe remains the absolute top priority. Health guarantees the payout. A deceased captive holds 0 leverage, meaning the captive must remain completely pristine to serve as living collateral. The prisoner must look healthy enough to guarantee the upcoming transaction, ensuring the ransom demands are ultimately met without hesitation. Nobody engineers an elaborate hostage scheme just to violently assault their prize right on the front doorstep. Such tactics make 0 logistical sense. Spilling blood before leaving the property signals a catastrophic collapse of the original strategy. Therefore, analyzing the physical struggle here, specifically the tragic injuries the elderly woman suffered, reveals absolutely nothing about malicious forethought. We are staring at a botched job. We are dissecting an intricate trap designed for a completely peaceful extraction, imploding instantly right outside that suburban foothills home, under the cover of total darkness, while the surrounding city slumbered. Drawing blood was never on his agenda. An unexpected variable ruined everything. The absolute best theory behind this rapid deterioration relies on basic human instinct. She instantly realized the true identity of her attacker. That fatal flash of familiarity instantly vaporized every careful contingency the kidnapper had mapped out. We will prove this exact theory today. Let us reconstruct this narrative using raw facts. Veteran federal detective Andrew Bringwell never just accidentally involved himself in this nightmare. He actively pursued the investigation, scrutinized all the public clues, and heavily reviewed the security tapes. He weighed the chronology, evaluated the physical environment, the hidden weaponry, the utility bag, and the extortion letters. He ultimately delivered a major statement to a massive publication containing an insight that remains criminally overlooked by the mainstream media. Quoting him directly, the suspect aimed to abduct the woman, yet everything derailed, resulting in an unintended physical altercation that left her severely wounded, but alive. Now really process that statement. We are not hearing emotional theories from mourning relatives or desperate podcasters hunting for viral shock value. This seasoned professional dedicated decades of his life to top-tier law enforcement. specializing precisely in vicious assaults and missing persons operations. He possesses an elite level of practical field knowledge that literally no internet sleuth can ever hope to match. Furthermore, his highly trained, objective conclusion explicitly labels this incident as a hostage grab, rather than an assassination or a random beating. It was a calculated snatching driven by an external motive, until an unforeseen glitch derailed the operation. He shared another critical detail during that conversation which carries equal weight to his initial explosive claim. Had death been the primary objective, the investigator noted, the intruder possessed the necessary tools right there on his hip, as his firearm was fully prepped. Drawing the weapon was effortless, and his target was an 84-year-old solitary woman ambushed, totally off guard during the darkest part of the night. Simply executing her right outside her front door would have been an incredibly easy, straightforward task. If murder was actually the mission, murder required just one simple trigger pull from the gun he already gripped on that porch. Yet he inexplicably froze. Holding his fire wasn't just a random pause. It stands as a massive behavioral clue for detectives unraveling this mystery. Any hitman, arriving on those steps, possessed the perfect lethal tools. Staring down a completely helpless victim who offered absolutely zero physical resistance. However, he completely ignored those lethal options, proving the ensuing bloodshed stemmed from chaos rather than a calculated, cold-blooded assassination. Total chaos bred the brutality here, as an unexpected wrench thrown into his scheme triggered brutal fallout he never anticipated. Brywell also highlighted a chilling historical parallel that seriously demands our full attention today. He brought up the 1991 abduction of Carrie Lawson, a 25-year-old lawyer snatched from her Alabama home during a classic extortion plot. This perfectly mirrors the entire Guthrie mystery setup. Snatching someone for extortion rather than murder was prime suspect Jerry Bland's initial logical scheme before everything spectacularly fell apart. Sadly, Lawson perished. Her remains vanished forever, while Bland committed suicide right before authorities could force him to face justice. Ultimately, his cousin received a lifelong prison stint for her crucial role in the horrifying abduction scheme. Brywell carried this nightmare for decades, especially since it unfolded exactly when his first daughter was born, leaving permanent mental scars. He connected those old ghosts to Nancy Guthrie's nightmare primarily due to their terrifyingly identical underlying blueprints. Extortion drove both initial strikes. Though the Lawson debacle shattered violently and ended with a truly tragic death, while Guthrie's captor also lost control and inflicted harm, Brywell strongly concludes she ultimately survived the bloody ordeal. How both plans imploded differs entirely. Despite differing fallouts, the core strategy remained identical: steal a human, hold them hostage for massive leverage, and demand a payout. Applying Lawson's grim lesson to Guthrie reveals one chilling truth from Brywell once an extortion plot derails. The kidnapper's original desires no longer dictate the ending. Instead, the final tragedy hinges entirely on whatever frantic choices a terrified criminal makes when reality shatters their perfect blueprint. What exactly blew up his flawless scheme here? Solving that core mystery requires examining the porch footage, where psychological clues point overwhelmingly toward one crystal-clear explanation. Decoding the spectacular failure demands recognizing the absolute arrogance driving the mastermind who originally crafted the trap. Through that specific lens, the security video transcends mere legal proof and becomes a profound psychological roadmap. Treat the clip as a raw glimpse into an arrogant mind right before his entire universe violently crumbled. It screams a terrifying truth. Ignored by mainstream media coverage entirely, this predator felt absolutely zero fear. Rewatch the tape, ignoring his tactical blunders, his missing gear, or how federal agents eventually traced his knapsack, weapon mount, and the exact designer label stamped on his gloves. Pundits have already spent 9 long weeks exhausting every single one of those tedious investigative details. Focus strictly on his physical posture to uncover his inner certainty about the impending attack. Ex-federal investigator and college criminology expert Brianna Fox characterized his movements using incredibly sharp, calculated phrasing. He essentially strolls right up, she noted. Acting like he owned the place wasn't just idle chatter from Fox, a certified profiler who knows that strolling indicates zero rush. It shows no hidden terror, revealing a predator who vividly visualized the upcoming strike and found absolutely nothing worthy of panic. Retired Agent Mark Harrion agreed completely. Having previously directed elite government tactical shooting programs, he analyzed the identical clip and reached matching conclusions through alternative logic. Any actual professional would arrive fully prepared from the jump. He explained to the New York Post during an interview. They would pack a mallet, specialized tools, or dark aerosol paint to permanently blind the security lens before triggering any alarms. Instead of packing proper tools, this guy completely winged it by grabbing a random leafy branch from the front garden. However, dissecting that spontaneous move reveals a deeper truth beyond just a painfully sloppy preparation phase. It showcases extreme arrogance, proving his mind never bothered simulating potential roadblocks or preparing for a worst-case disaster scenario. He only envisioned absolute victory. Anyone who seriously contemplates failure always brings the right smashing tools for backup. Someone blinded by their own ego just snaps off a twig, treating the surveillance gear as a totally insignificant nuisance. It was merely a slight bump in a battle he already conquered mentally. While his gun reveals even more clues, Harrion quickly flagged the bizarre way the attacker transported his deadly sidearm. Strapping a cheap, off-brand rig right to his front belly struck investigators as a massive tactical red flag immediately. Real operators never carry iron like that. Nor would anyone genuinely experienced with live combat zones set up their battle gear so amateurishly. Harrion's initial take hit hard. This suspect rarely carried firearms. That steel was purely theatrical, meant to force submission instead of shedding any real blood. His entire profile backs this up perfectly. Since flashing a weapon is strictly about causing terror, it sends a clear message that playing along is smart and fighting back is absolutely pointless. The goal was smooth execution, not murder, a theory backed by Weaver Barkman, who investigated for Puma County Sheriff for 26 years before going private. Reviewing the tapes, he caught a glaring inconsistency regarding how the intruder clumsily handled those security cameras. This guy possessed serious anti-forensic skills. Not a patch of skin showed beneath his mask. Gloves, coat, slacks, and boots. He knew exactly how detectives operate, taking extreme precautions to avoid leaving behind any physical trace. You don't see that kind of meticulous planning from hotheads. This was a highly calculated operation. Yet, his careful anti-forensic measures clashed wildly with his clumsy camera response, revealing a very specific arrogance. He obsessed over the tiny clues he might leave behind afterward, but he completely ignored potential mid-heist hiccups. Assuming his grand scheme was virtually foolproof from the start, the victim would surrender. Everything would stay controlled, guaranteeing total victory. He planned for the escape because crimes have endings, but ignored the lenses because cameras only matter when you fail. And in his deluded fantasy world, failure simply was not on the menu. Harrion's psychological profile, Barkman's physical evidence review, and Fox's kinetic breakdown all point to one single truth. We see a guy showing up cool and calm, blindly trusting a script that promised an easy win. He was smart enough to beat the lab techs, yet far too naive to have a decent backup strategy. He arrogantly assumed he could predict his vulnerable victim's every single move before it even happened. Let's look past the mere presence of the weapon and examine what it actually reveals about his twisted mindset. Dangling a pistol from a flimsy front-mounted holster instead of the hip is a move that tactical professionals universally laugh at. That setup isn't designed for actual combat. It is a pure intimidation tactic, positioned specifically to immediately catch the terrified victim's eye. It forces her to realize that submitting is her only hope, ensuring the entire plot runs on fear instead of brutal violence. Visible guns in compliance-driven kidnapping serve exactly this psychological purpose. It acts as the ultimate trump card, preventing a struggle, while the face covering guarantees absolute anonymity. Flawless timing eliminates witnesses. His clean suit destroyed evidence, and the flaunted steel crushed any thoughts of rebellion, forcing her immediate and complete surrender. Everything flows flawlessly according to his script, meaning he never actually intended to pull that trigger. The weapon was just a stage prop for a twisted play that violently derailed from its original script. Looking closely at the fatal disconnect between his theatrical setup and the bloody reality on that patio, you realize his perfect scheme shattered upon hitting an unrecoverable roadblock. Plus, That covering wasn't merely cosmetic. When snatching someone for serious cash, concealing your face is an absolute cornerstone of the entire operation. Not just basic armor. Grasping its true purpose explains exactly why the disaster spun so wildly out of control. Whenever taking a captive for cash or leverage, keeping the victim clueless about who grabbed them is the only path to a clean getaway. If Nancy Guthrie got snatched and ransomed, her eventual freedom hinged completely on her never seeing her deranged captor's actual face. That disguise was the golden ticket to a safe conclusion, doing way more than just hiding his basic features. It secured his escape route, ensuring that once the dust settled, detectives would have absolutely zero viable leads to follow. Strip away that facial cover or render it totally useless, and the whole mastermind plot instantly goes up in smoke. Once the victim identifies her kidnapper, letting her live becomes impossible. A freed hostage dials 911 immediately, permanently destroying the criminal's future and making her safe return an absolute pipe dream. Bargaining flies out the window, and that peaceful resolution the disguise was supposed to guarantee vanishes forever. Every single outcome where she gets to return to normalcy demands that she stays absolutely blind to the monster who actually took her. That disguise wasn't merely meant to conceal an identity, it existed entirely to safeguard tomorrow. So the exact second that covering fails, regardless of how or why, the very destiny it shielded vanishes completely into thin air, leaving the individual, whose meticulously plotted timeline just evaporated, frozen right there on someone's front steps, shrouded in shadows alongside a lady who suddenly transforms from a manageable mark into a liability he absolutely cannot let go. Ex-federal profiler Johnny Gruing dedicated 25 years to the Denver Bureau, ultimately directing their psychological assessment team for 13 of those seasons. He has openly shared his professional insights regarding the grim events unfolding within those walls. His conclusion pulls no punches, things went wildly off script, and the perpetrator found himself drowning in an impossible situation. Brutality was never secretly on the agenda. It merely erupted because the mastermind's blueprint fell completely apart in a totally unforeseen manner. Weighing original goals against complete breakdowns offers a vital perspective. It clearly serves as the ultimate lens for fully grasping the identification hypothesis, since this concept isn't actually about the attacker's original dark desires. Rather, it explores the exact fatal flaw that doomed the entire operation from succeeding. It accurately pinpoints the precise trigger-flipping absolute order into utter chaos, specifically avoiding any blame on unexpected external surprises, ruining things, a hidden factor lurking right there in the shadows from the very first moment. An element the heavy disguise was genuinely meant to cancel out, yet, as forensic clues strongly suggest, completely failed to suppress in reality. Ultimately, this incredibly upscale district rests right against the Santa Catalina peaks above Tucson, standing physically and socially higher than the surrounding metropolis. The area thrives on a deeply intentional serenity, one entirely born from unshakable generational wealth and deeply rooted security. Everyone knows everybody, and the daily routines follow incredibly predictable, comforting patterns. Local residents move with genuine relaxed confidence, perfectly at home in their exclusive enclave, making curious outsiders stick out like a sore thumb immediately. A strange silhouette or someone lacking the local swagger instantly invites suspicious stares from everyone watching nearby. Nancy Guthrie practically anchored that community for ages, always showing up faithfully to Sunday services, living beside the exact same folks forever. She nurtured those deep bonds unique to historically close and wealthy suburban enclaves. She possessed that rare communal instinct, deeply recognizing her long-standing peers not simply by monikers, but through their remarkably distinct bodily languages, how a buddy carries their frame, or the unmistakable timbre echoing from a known companion. Even tracking the exact stride of an individual she had passed endlessly along those manicured sidewalks. Those subtle quirks soaked up naturally over time, rendering recognition completely instinctive before logic even kicks in, proving identity transcends facial features. Here naturally lies the massive fatal flaw. The physical disguise missed entirely, woven fabric hides sharp cheekbones, but it never once conceals vocal tones or body proportions. Postures, exact heights, and unique gaits remain entirely exposed. continuously broadcasting an unmistakable physical dictionary that any close acquaintance has subconsciously memorized without ever intending to. It absolutely fails to mask those unconscious tics. How a guy balances his weight while idling, or the peculiar manner he clenches his fists. A signature cranial tilt acting just like a highly visible fingerprint. Loudly screaming an individual's identity to anybody who has spent countless quiet seasons studying their everyday presence. If the shadowy figure stepping onto that patio was a man Nancy Guthrie interacted with, casually observed, or chatted up previously, anyone lingering around her turf or brushing past her family circles meant the facial covering was destined to fail from the start. This was not due to shoddy craftsmanship, or it suddenly slipping out of place mid-crime. Rather, certain individuals just can never achieve true anonymity around folks who already recognize them from decades of shared history. You definitely cannot camouflage a vocal cord or hide respiratory rhythms. There is zero chance of hiding the deep-rooted mannerisms of an individual whose entire aura you have memorized so thoroughly that recognizing them skips logical deduction entirely. It hits like lightning, a silent, gut-level epiphany, bypassing logic that absolutely demands zero secondary proof. She would have pegged him instantly. Just pause and digest the sheer brutal irony of that tragic miscalculation for a minute. Every single layer of premeditation featured headgear, handwear, and heavily layered apparel. Even the exact scheduling aimed to suppress evidence, tightly restricting whatever the victim perceived and eventually confessed. That hood served as the linchpin for his secrecy protocol, making a flawless getaway impossible without its success. Wearing it theoretically tied the whole strategy together seamlessly. Yet the disguise fundamentally flopped, not from slipping down accidentally or sporting some pathetic structural flaw. It backfired horribly because the perpetrator committed a fatal error regarding the specific human traits that absolutely refused to stay hidden. He braced for standard hurdles, anticipating basic facial memory. He stupidly relied on standard tools built to thwart surface-level spotting, while completely neglecting the profoundly instinctual familiarity naturally forged through decades of close contact. How a torso naturally stands upright, alongside the unmistakable tempo of deep inhalations. Total familiarity breeds a dangerous sixth sense, hardwiring another person's unique rhythm deep into your subconscious. Sight becomes completely unnecessary when countless shared moments allow you to just feel someone's sheer closeness. He mapped out her daily habits, her prescriptions, and her deepest frailties. Clues heavily imply he pinpointed the exact time frame she remained isolated and entirely defenseless. Yet he ignored the single pivotal detail that doomed the whole operation. Can she recognize my identity? Instantly. His pristine scheme, the getaway, the ransom trade. Any route depending on her staying quiet evaporated completely. Picture the sheer gravity of that split second, though not through Nancy Guthrie's eyes. We owe her inner experience profound respect rather than cheap guesswork. So step inside the mastermind's shoes instead. He approached that doorstep carrying an underworld plot boasting brilliant scale, despite its clumsy delivery, mastering basic trace evidence evasion. He masked all exposed flesh while selecting the perfect strike window. Those quiet pre-dawn shadows offered maximum advantage against an 84-year-old target. Utterly solitary, she seemed guaranteed to surrender without triggering a messy physical struggle to ruin his blueprint. Thorough rehearsals gave him absolute confidence as he thought, "This is my game, perfectly orchestrated. Victory is already mine." He likely assumed right before her sudden glance completely ruined it. His unique bodily rhythm betrayed him, tearing straight through the disguise because she subconsciously knew those mannerisms perfectly. His realization of her sudden awareness did not simply dial up the stakes. It completely obliterated the timeline, torching the careful abduction, the secure confinement, and the ransom talks. The seamless trade-off and flawless getaway where his disguise worked and her life continued simply dissolved into nothing. Strategy no longer existed. Only a trapped architect remained, gripping a captive he dare not free, utterly clueless about his next move. Profilers see this constantly when an offender's strict script shatters. Logical shifts toward alternative solutions simply never happen. Forget cool-headed problem-solving, pure. Textbook psychological terror takes the wheel. Structured cognitive framing crumbles entirely, leaving behind the chaotic, desperate reflexes of someone trapped in a dead end. previously unimaginable extremes become reality. Brutal force, initially banished from the blueprint to preserve the captive's bargaining worth, suddenly morphs into the lone viable escape. Investigators summarize this exact phenomenon by declaring the intruder drowned in his own depth. They paint a picture of an amateur engineering a crisis too colossal for his own coping mechanisms. His entire setup relied on a singular 22 free, flawless outcome. The instant reality deviated from his rigid script. His tactical shallow waters offered no room to adapt. Blind terror hijacked his mind, leaving those grim crimson stains on the wood. Such aggression was never intended. That brutal outburst served as his strategy's grave. Throughout 10 broadcast segments and 9 weeks of media tracking, experts continually circle back to those lingering doorstep clues, assembling the psychological profile, motive analysis, and tactical breakdown finally provides us the ultimate lens. Adding his spontaneous meltdown to the mix decodes those crimson drops, proving they don't simply document a fatal strike. They chronicle pure chaos. A fact, retired federal agent Maureen O'Connell proved by highlighting a crucial stain anomaly everyone ignored. Absolutely zero blank spaces existed within those forensic fluid spreads. Experts define these empty pockets as shadows cast whenever an obstacle intercepts the red spray mid-air. Upright victims inevitably block droplets from hitting the floor directly beneath their shoes. Hauling a body creates unmistakable linear streaks, painting a clear picture of dead weight scraping across the ground. O'Connell spotted zero scraping or shoe blocks, revealing the victim wasn't upright, walking, or getting pulled along the floorboards. Her ultimate deduction hit hard. The attacker bundled the elderly woman up and hoisted her away. Lifting rather than dragging proves this intruder wasn't merely discarding a ruined liability. Preserving her off the ground means she retained immense worth to an assailant whose mental state was entirely unraveling. He flatly refused to commit the ultimate act that would instantly vaporize his only bargaining chip. Transporting her intact confirmed she remained a vital asset to a kidnapper, desperately clinging to his original underlying objective. Keeping her breathing was the ultimate prize, not just an obstacle to overcome. One medical examiner independently reviewed those crime scene pictures and broke down exactly how those crimson splatters formed. Those hollowed-out rings and light centers proved the spray came straight from the airways. Entirely different from laceration bleeding, it left the unmistakable mark of exhalation, proving the victim kept taking active breaths. As those stains hit the pavement, Andrew Bringwell laid out the reality clearly for Newsweek. She suffered severe harm without losing her life. Every single clue, from the missing scrape marks to the unique splatter profiles, aligns flawlessly with this exact theory. What unfolded on that patio was brutally intense, bringing a genuinely heavy and terrifying weight to the entire situation. Yet this was absolutely never intended to be an assassination. It was pure chaos taking control. The whole scheme fell to pieces, triggering the exact nightmare scenario the mastermind desperately wanted to dodge, leaving a desperate kidnapper dragging a living captive from her residence because his shattered plot demanded her survival. Those crimson stains on the ground hardly mark the final chapter of Nancy Guthrie's terrifying ordeal. Instead, they pinpoint the exact split second when the original operation completely spiraled out of control. This footage holds massive significance that extends way past the simple sequence of those initial patio events. Detectives struggle infinitely more when hunting calculated professionals compared to terrified amateurs, simply because seasoned criminals always practice their moves. Masterminds meticulously calculate their cyber footprints, their physical movements, and their inevitable interpersonal interactions long before striking. They anticipate onlookers while aggressively scrubbing their tracks, ensuring the resulting crime appears flawless and takes forever to solve. Meanwhile, a terrified suspect making things up on the fly presents a totally unique challenge for pursuing detectives. It isn't automatically simpler. But the dynamics shift drastically when an overwhelmed amateur chooses immediate survival over brilliant tactical foresight. Sheer desperation pushes them to suddenly contact completely risky and dangerous personal associations. Blind panic forces erratic movements that scatter accidental clues all over, triggering massive blunders born from sheer terror instead of calculated logic. These critical slip-ups never happen by random chance. They follow a highly recognizable sequence. Extreme fear breeds highly anticipated behavioral flaws. which seasoned detectives can effortlessly decode. Grusing highlighted this exact concept during his broadcast, proving federal agents know exactly who they are currently hunting down. They certainly aren't chasing a seasoned hitman or some veteran accustomed to pulling off flawless tactical operations. As he so perfectly put it, the culprit completely underestimated the sheer magnitude of the situation. This suspect has spent every day since the 1st of February trapped in a living nightmare, frantically scrambling to fix a botched job while nervously tracking the heat. They stay glued to headlines, buckling under massive stress, and dropping totally uncalculated breadcrumbs that look absolutely nothing like premeditated clues. The ticking clock plays a massively important role in this botched plot theory, directly impacting the current standing of the massive manhunt. Any ghost who pulls off a truly flawless hit basically owns the clock forever. Each passing sunrise without a major arrest just lets the hot leads freeze over entirely. Recollections blur and physical DNA rots away, proving that a truly successful strategy grants the ultimate luxury of endless breathing room. However, any frantic amateur desperately fighting against the ticking clock just leaves glaring gaps everywhere. This absolute chaos triggers incredibly weird habits that loved ones and close friends will inevitably spot. Roommates and family quickly catch on to any sudden paranoia, wild mood swings, or a deeply unhealthy new obsession with local media coverage. The frightened suspect must fake a perfectly mundane life while secretly battling a complete mental breakdown as the intense manhunt drags out week after week. Carrying that kind of extreme psychological burden is absolutely crushing. Weak minds inevitably shatter from the heavy strain, causing suspects to suddenly spill highly sensitive secrets. They act so unbelievably bizarre that their inner circle starts getting highly suspicious. That exact same rookie energy displayed on the patio back on the 1st of February practically guarantees they will collapse under the intense heat much faster than a seasoned pro. Federal agents completely understand this, explaining why Savannah Guthrie's specific media appearances act as highly calculated psychological traps, which brilliantly showcases their absolute mastery over the elusive suspect's extremely fragile mental state. Detectives aren't simply logging boring clues, they are actively squeezing the suspect, dialing up the heat to practically force a massive mental breakdown. Additionally, the strong theory that she personally knew her attacker completely shifts the entire search radius. If Nancy Guthrie actually identified her aggressive kidnapper, they absolutely had some undeniable prior history together. Nameless ghosts only get caught via tedious DNA hits and digital records, but hunting down someone directly from her own personal circle changes the entire game, meaning someone so intimately familiar that she instantly spotted his identity through a thick disguise during a terrifying and pitch-black struggle. The monster lives right in her own backyard, trapped within the tight geographic borders of her familiar streets, hovering inside her relatives' tight rings. Deep within the local circles she called home for decades, there is a strict limit on suspects and personal ties, creating a small pool of matches that detectives have combed through during our 10 episodes spanning 9 weeks. This intense probe pulled in federal agents, uncovering genetic clues alongside desperate extortion demands, plus thousands of public leads capturing the total focus of top-tier national policing authorities. Stripping this massive manhunt down to its absolute core reveals just 2 chilling statements. He genuinely never intended to cause any physical harm, but then she saw his face. That initial fact explains why she survived the initial grab. It shows why the bloody crime scene highlights a chaotic struggle rather than a calculated, murderous assault on her. It clarifies why a veteran federal profiler reviewed the messy clues and determined this was meant to be an extortion grab before things spiraled completely out of control. It reveals why the crimson stains left on the ground proved she was actively inhaling during the attack. It explains why she was lifted instead of roughly pulled, carefully bundled rather than tossed aside, abducted but definitely not murdered right there in the yard. That latter revelation completely obliterated his entire blueprint for getting away with the perfect crime. The primary statement shows his goal. It explains how a meticulously organized kidnapping mutated into a blood-soaked walkway, a vanished lady, and a massive nationwide search. That sudden recognition became the single factor his scheme could not withstand. The fatal flaw that his disguise utterly failed to conceal from her eyes. It was the ultimate curveball that no degree of sterile cleaning, precise scheduling, or tactical plotting could predict. The fact she stared straight through his facial covering and instantly identified her attacker. This story carries a powerful and unsettling lesson about human arrogance, awareness, and the fragile line between control and chaos. The attacker believed he had planned everything perfectly, every movement, every detail, every outcome. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the power of human connection. He forgot that familiarity goes beyond appearances. A voice, a posture, a presence. These are things no disguise can truly hide. In life, we often think preparation alone guarantees success. But real understanding comes from recognizing what we cannot control, especially people. Emotions, instincts, and relationships are unpredictable forces that can break even the most calculated plans. This case also reminds us of the importance of awareness. Sometimes, danger doesn't come from strangers, but from those within our own circles. Trust should never mean blind certainty. Staying alert, even in familiar environments, is a form of self-protection, not fear. And finally, it teaches us about responsibility. One small observation, one memory, one decision to speak up can change everything. Justice is not built by investigators alone. It depends on ordinary people choosing to act. Because in the end, truth is not just discovered. It is revealed by those who refuse to stay silent.